Brian.
Good morning and welcome to the November 22nd, 2022 meeting of the Land Use and Environment Committee. We have one agenda item today, a report on the Neighborhood Commercial Forum that occurred recently. And is Hans with us today to give that?
He would be remote, so I don't know if anybody has the ability to bring him in.
He's on his way now.
Okay, great. Thank you. Hello, Hans.
Hi, everyone.
You're on.
Morning.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for having me. I am going to present about the neighborhood commercial districts and the participation that we've had so far to date. We started with the initial kickoff about a week ago now. And we did that in two different formats. We did that in a in-person online format over at the Salish Middle School in their commons area. And then we also simultaneously launched a web page within the city website that runs through just kind of the background information, what we hope to accomplish, kind of sets the stage really. And then at this point, we're really driving most participants to the survey, really just as really an information collection point. Really don't want to do a whole lot of leading. We really just are primarily here to listen and collect feedback at this point to gain guidance on what are the best options for moving forward. So I might actually just share my screen. See if I can do this successfully. There's too many options. All right, I think hopefully everyone can see that. This is actually the on the city webpage right now. And this is the project website, if you will. So it's neighborhood commercial districts. It lives currently within our community and economic development kind of section of the website, if you will. And then it offers a little bit of backstory, a little bit of information, links people to that section of code. So if they really want to, they can actually read in detail what's in there today. And then kind of sets the stage for what we're looking to do moving forward. There's a link down here both to the survey and to the open house posters, so the ones that we presented in person. Jumping over to this next tab here, there's a little bit more information about the actual open house itself. There's a
picture of the actual open house.
Yeah,
It was a good turnout.
Did that work for you guys?
Yeah, I can see that.
Okay. Yeah, so I think overall throughout the entirety of the night, we had around 100 participants at the open house. And it was in that kind of flexible format. So folks can show up with any time within that 6 to 8 p.m. window, look at the boards, have conversations with staff, provide feedback, and then depart once they've kind of reached they've accomplished what they came to do. And then down here, you can also navigate through the posters that we had available at the open house. So it's a kind of an introductory one. I'm not going to run through all of these, but they are up there and they are available for folks to flip through. And then you can also download them here. So if you want to look at them in detail, those are available. But yeah, so it was a welcome history, a little bit of backstory, where they're located and why. And then more specifically, the emphasis of this one was a little bit on the northern neighborhood commercial districts, as those ones are the ones that are primarily undeveloped at this time compared to the ones that are to the south that are more developed. And then the attention that was around Meridian Market was a big driver for this. So really trying to go as close to that location as possible, really trying to remove some of those barriers to participate so folks can really kind of provide their feedback in whatever format made sense. And then we have the survey tab right here. So just really, again, redirecting folks to the survey. And we're hoping to run this through the end of December.
Do you have a count on hits on the survey yet?
We do, yeah. So if I can just jump over to this. So this is kind of the backside of the survey analytics. So it's what we get to see when folks participate. And as of today, in this moment, we have 277 responses to the survey. So that's a pretty decent response rate so far. The survey on average takes around 10 minutes to complete is what we're seeing. And there's not a whole lot of drop off rate. So people that start the survey and don't finish it. So that's actually, we're doing pretty well on that front, which means that it's generally speaking, not too complicated of a survey and pretty straightforward, so people can get through it in a reasonable amount of time without deciding to go do other things. So that's good to see. And then as far as the types of feedback that we've received so far, so we are still hoping to run through the end of December, really trying to leave that window open as much as possible. We have about 4 more social media boosts or campaigns that are going out. So really to just kind of really remind folks that this is out there, redirect them to the survey, kind of really encourage as much participation as possible. So we do have some early results, but these are preliminary at this point, and we are still expecting quite a few more folks to participate in this. So with that, I can kind of run through some of the high level stuff as far as what we've been hearing so far. And then also who's participating. So to date, the majority of, or the largest participation block of people that are providing feedback within the survey are retired, which is not necessarily something that is a surprise based on the attention that we've received around specifically Meridian Market and where this is taking place. So that's one block that we're seeing there. We are making some efforts to reach out to the youth council and other groups that are in the community to try to boost a little bit more of that younger participation as well, just so we can get a little bit more of a balanced response rate. But as of today, right now, majority of respondents are in that retired bracket, and that's further kind of echoed out in the age question that we see here. So
59.
yeah, I think around the largest response group is in that 70 plus age range, to give you an idea of kind of where we're at with that. And then that's one thing that we did see that is kind of interesting is that we're getting a lot more of a response rate from those that are self-identifying as female. So we're almost seeing more than double actually female respondents versus male respondents, which I don't really have a good answer for why that is.
There's a certain demographic of people that typically fill out surveys. I'm not super surprised by those numbers.
But yeah, so that is what we're seeing there. So that maybe isn't in line with that. And then we did ask a race or ethnicity question, and we are seeing, given there is a pretty dominant or strong response rate from white or Caucasian respondents, but at the same time, we are still seeing some participation rate from other groups, which is good to see. So that's what we have there. And then moving into this question was a little bit more interesting to me. I think it ties back into the number of people that are responding as retired. A lot of.
Can you make that just a little bigger?
Yeah, let me see if I can just go.
Maybe I can make it bigger on my end.
Let's see if I thought I had a zoom button on here that would make that happen. See a zoom out option. That's not going to be helpful at all. I don't know that we
That's all right.
have that option, but I can send you all of this. We'll do an export and give you the details on it. So for as far as we did ask the question, do you live or work within the city of Lacey? And the options were I live there, I work there, I live and work there, or I don't live or work there or don't want to respond. But the largest response was from those that specifically live within the city of Lacey, and then followed up by live and work. I think around 83% of respondents live within Lacey, while 17 respondents work within Lacey. And I think that pairs up, is pretty consistent with the retirement question that we had earlier. So a lot of people live here but are no longer working is what we're kind of seeing by that. And then annual household income. This is some kind of just general demographic stuff that is important to ask as part of any survey that we do, just to make sure that we're getting a representative demographic of, or cross section, I should say, of people that live in Lacey. And then we did ask a neighborhood association question. So we did reach out on a range of different formats, one of which was we contacted all of the different HOAs in the community, as well as everybody that signed up through the Meridian Market email chain. So we used a couple different avenues to get the word out and encourage people to participate. But the number 1 and number 2 HOA blocks, I should say, are Meridian Campus and Jubilee. So those are the ones that are most strongly represented. We do have some other ones. These are the ones that are listed are primarily ones that are located in the northern area of the community, but we do have a lot of fill in the blank ones as well. So we did get to see some participation rates from other HOAs as well. And then, how often do you travel outside the city of Lacey for shopping or service related needs? This one was actually nice to see that while around 38% responded a few times a week, the majority of those that did respond, if you add up the rest of them, are only going out a few times a month or less. So majority of respondents are actually getting most of their service related or grocery shopping oriented needs met within the community. So that's a positive there. And then so some of these questions were the first part of these questions are more kind of general experience questions. And then after we get some of that high level stuff, then we dive more into neighborhood commercial specific questions. So we did ask a follow-up question to that previous one. What are some of the most frequent retail or service related businesses you seek out in other communities? The number one being Trader Joe's or something similar. So I do lump things in like Whole Foods. We saw a lot of co-op or farmers market, things of that nature. So kind of a local, healthier kind of vegetable oriented emphasis was kind of one of the prominent themes that we see throughout there. Yeah, do you have a question?
Can we make this data go farther and use this to justify the installation of a Trader Joe's like grocery store up there?
I think that
I've had a lot of people ask me about that. I think it's funny that everyone says, oh, Trader Joe's on the survey, because I've had people ask specifically about getting a Trader Joe's in Northeast Lacey.
Yeah, I think that there's definitely some compelling information in here. I don't know that it's necessarily has to be Trader Joe's specifically. I also saw things like Spuds get listed a lot. So something definitely within that realm. I think based on at least the feedback that we've heard so far does seem to mesh well with the express needs of North Lacey, for sure.
And
Rick
if I can
may
just
be
add,
able to, I was going to say, Rick, is the Meridian Market similar to a grocery store of that size, like a small grocery store?
It's going to be probably more, they've talked about a market similar to something up in Pierce County in Tacoma, but it's going to be kind of probably more on a bridge of a convenience store with some fresh produce, kind of like you see in some of the convenience stores are going to, in like your 7-Elevens, those type of things. And how we'll use this data too, because this is always information when we go out to the public and get engagements. We always find little tidbits or jewels, and they will help support also, like as you just mentioned, our economic development efforts, and along with our market study, help us put together a framework for here's what are the goods and services that are residents in the city of Lacey want in particular areas or in the community as a whole. And we'll share this information too with brokers and property and developers as to help say, have you reached out to these type of businesses or these type of services to help facilitate that. And we've done that over the years. We've done detailed consumer surveys, say, hey, what do you want to see? What do you like in the market? What's not in the market? And we've used that pretty successfully to help inform our broker community.
Yeah, so this was definitely, while the majority of the emphasis of the survey was around neighborhood commercial, this is a great opportunity to find out a little bit more just about kind of consumer habits and what some of the needs are that are out there. So there's definitely some additional value that we're getting out of this. But yeah, so local farm fresh, organic, co-op type establishments were commonly called out as one of the things that folks were looking for, hoping for, and currently traveling to other locations to meet those needs. So that was one thing that was in there that was definitely something we want to think about moving forward. And then the next question was kind of getting back into one of the intents of neighborhood commercial districts is really to fill in some of those gaps in the farther flung reaches of the community that aren't very close to existing commercial style, more traditional style commercial developments. So to address some of those everyday kind of short trip needs, so that don't require traveling all the way into kind of the downtown commercial zones, if you will. So connecting with that, one of the questions that we wanted to find out about is how many people live within more or less what is considered a 15-minute walking shed of a either commercial center or one of these neighborhood commercial districts. Really kind of tying back into that, trying to reduce car trips and promoting more of kind of a walkable community. What we're seeing is the majority of folks that participated in the survey so far are in that no category. And the follow-up question to that was, what are some of the hurdles that prevent you from essentially traveling in non-vehicle ways? So walking, biking, transit, other forms of travel. And the big ones that we're seeing are proximity and safety concerns. And if we dig a little bit deeper on that, as far as responses, there's a lot of missing links that were identified. So folks don't feel comfortable using the current roadway system to get to these locations, either because of traffic or because of a lack of sidewalk or bike lane connections, something of that nature. And then the other one is just proximity. They're too far away. It's the Pacific Northwest. You're not always trying to travel uncovered in the elements. So those are the common themes that we're seeing so far within that one. And then we did want to learn more about where respondents live, just because there is a possibility that we are going to look more specifically at actually tweaking each one of these zones individually to really kind of match the expectations and desires of each neighborhood or community that they exist within. So trying to collect information on where respondents, what the closest neighborhood commercial district to where respondents live. And again, what we're seeing is that it's the Meridian Market and then the Marvin Road and 41st Ave are the two strongest ones. So definitely people from the North Lacey is what we're seeing as far as participants so far. And that's consistent with where people are responding as far as HOAs and some of the other questions that kind of get at that information. So one of the values in that is that later on we can break the survey out and the responses based on where people generally live geographically. And then we can see if there's any trends or desires that exist more in one place than another. So we can really kind of right size these zones to really reflect those needs. And then some of this gets more into the open-ended questions. So this one here was, in what ways can neighborhood commercial districts support and strengthen our neighborhood communities and businesses? And we had 157 people respond to this question, and each response is pretty lengthy. So we haven't gone through all of these yet. But as far as kind of common themes, we can pop over to this word cloud just to see some of the kind of things that are referenced most commonly. But there's lots of discussions of community, businesses, neighborhoods, and how they kind of really all interact. But really kind of that scale was a common theme as well. So smaller, kind of right sizing these districts to really kind of match the communities that they're in is something that is borne out in a lot of these conversations that we see here. And then other things like protecting natural environment and traffic and things like that are also common themes that we saw throughout. And then the next question is, what types of stores or businesses would you like to see in these neighborhood districts? So that kind of gets back to that conversation that we had a little bit earlier. See a lot of Trader Joe's, a lot of that co-op, smaller local farm fresh style grocery stores is a huge one. So that blend of grocery stores, we see a lot of restaurants, smaller kind of neighborhood kind of gathering style places, maybe some bookstores, coffee shops. Those are common themes that we saw within this section. But definitely far and beyond the big one is the grocery stores, but the smaller kind of style ones that folks are looking for. So that's what we're seeing there. And then this one was a more kind of identify your range of agreement with the following statement. So everything from I strongly agree with this to I strongly disagree with this. And it was, please identify your level of agreement with the following statements as they relate to neighborhood commercial districts. So the lead was neighborhood commercial districts should, and then we had a range of different statements that people responded to. The first one being, see if I can highlight that. So it says prioritize allowed uses over exterior design elements. And we wanted to get at this question because in our current code, how it's written is that there is kind of this emphasis of listing specific uses. And one of the things that we're running into is that requires us to project specific uses and anticipate what those specific uses are into the future, which sometimes we get right and sometimes we get wrong. So there is that tricky balance of trying to anticipate what's going to be there, what the demands are going to be in the future. So examples of that might be Blockbuster, which 20 years ago may have made a whole lot of sense as a neighborhood commercial thing, but if we're taking the time to list that specifically now, doesn't really seem like it's offering much value. So it's that balance of listing specific uses or providing more specific details on what the design elements need to be of what these establishments are, making sure that they're compatible with the neighborhood, making sure that they really kind of enhance the feel of the community, really kind of build off of existing infrastructure. So your sidewalks or your transit stops, your access, things like that. So it's finding that blend. And what we're seeing in the responses here is that this one was actually pretty evenly distributed as far as responses, all the way from strongly agree to strongly disagree and everywhere in the middle. So there is definitely some opportunity to explore that one further and propose a couple alternatives, I think, moving forward as far as what that could look like and how we could really kind of realize this response within our current code. So that one's one that we get to pursue in the future, which is encouraging. The rest of these are pretty strongly in agreement. So they're pretty polar in that sense that most of these are pretty favorable. This one was complement the established neighborhood character. Generally speaking, everybody's for that. Emphasize and promote public gathering spaces. Again, pretty positive feedback on that one. Link to and enhance public transit infrastructure. So trying to really just place more of an emphasis on that human scale and moving away from such a car-centric emphasis on some of these locations. And again, we're seeing a positive response to that one. And then doubling down on that, encourage non-motorized forms of transportation. Again, really high positive response rate. And then target local neighborhood needs and services over regional services. So the types of uses that are permitted in these locations, really make sure that they're meeting the local need over kind of that regional draw, so that these are really have that region or local emphasis over kind of larger commercial style establishments. Yeah, is there a question?
I'm looking at these questions.
Mhm.
One interesting thing about surveys is if you don't make people choose or prioritize things, they'll just say yes to everything that sounds good. So like, you're seeing that a little bit here with, like, for most of those questions, like, yeah, of course we should support buses and make it a public gathering space. And like, so they'll just say yes to everything because these questions don't force a choice,
Mm-hmm.
right? You're not saying, should it be this or this? And that's hard to do with a Likert scale anyway.
Mhm.
But I'm wondering, like, we're probably not going to be deploying another survey, but I would be curious if the data had been framed differently so that people had to rank these things in order of how important they were to them. Like, if you could only have one of these things,
Mhm.
what would the thing be that you would choose as your priority? That might have given us a little bit more detail into like which things are most important for people. Because if you don't make them choose, like, yeah, do all those things.
Mhm.
Give us all the things we want at the local level and make it match the design theme of the neighborhood and support bikes. And like, yeah, let's do all those things, which is I know that's the purpose of the zoning criteria anyway, like that is the purpose of neighborhood commercial, but.
Yeah, that is a great point. We do see a little bit of that requirement of choice in the first question, where it's allowed uses over kind of the exterior design elements, which is where we do get that more of that.
And that one's a lot more well distributed, right? It's not weighted
Mhm.
so much.
Yeah, and the other one that we do see that in, and this is more of an indifference one, it seems like, is so right now residential uses are allowed on above the ground floor. They're not currently allowed on the ground floor with a neighborhood commercial. So one of the questions that we wanted to get out there was, should residential style uses be allowed on the ground floor as opposed to only above it? And most people felt relatively indifferent towards that one. We see that the majority of folks responded with no preference. And I will say that these other ones that folks did respond favorably to, a lot of these are already within our code and represented there. So it is more of a confirmation that there are significant sections of the code as it's written today that folks are in favor of and do appreciate and think are where this neighborhood commercial district should kind of come down as far as that range of offerings within the community. And then can you think of any, so this one was helpful in the sense that it's getting a little bit more specific. So we asked kind of a lot of general questions, but kind of getting at that visual and kind of experiential question. We asked folks to actually name locations that they've been to in other communities or within Lacey that they're a fan of, that they might want to see neighborhood commercial kind of modeled after, if you will. So there's a whole host of descriptions and different places that folks have traveled to and types, kind of development types that they're a fan of. We have things like Ruston Point was represented strongly, Poulsbo, DuPont, the Landing specifically, Bellingham, Proctor District, some of the smaller neighborhoods within Portland. So one of the nice things there is that we can actually go and look at the code for each one of these locations. Some of them are just general commercial, so that doesn't really translate cleanly, but a lot of these different communities do have something similar to a neighborhood commercial district. So we can actually look at that code and see some of the consistent elements that show up in those. And that might be something that we can bring forward as well. So that's a great opportunity there as far as additional information that we can bring. And then we also asked, what are some of the barriers to neighborhood commercial development in Lacey? What are some of the suggestions for achieving a community vision for these zones? And a lot of these comments talked about the scale of development, the types of development. A lot of them did still discuss Meridian Market specifically. There were concerns over traffic, kind of the regional pull versus the local pull of different locations, the loss of green spaces, yeah, cutting of trees, things like that. Those are all common themes that we saw within this. Again, these are things that we're going to dig deeper into and really kind of get the granular information on. But at this point, just as far as initial feedback, those are kind of the common themes that we're seeing within this section, as far as concerns, as far as what's happening currently today. And then we did ask should any of these districts be redesignated or converted to another use? So do these districts make sense in their current designation where they are? And again, we see the Meridian Market one pop pretty strongly here. And then the two next closest ones that are currently undeveloped show up prominently as well, which is not something that I would characterize as something that we didn't see coming. But it is, I mean, definitely based on where the open house was, where the kind of one of the drivers for this being Meridian Market is, that feedback is consistent with kind of what we're expecting in that one. So that's what we see there. And then this is kind of use the space below to expand on this answer. So if there's specific ones that you want to see changed or redesignated, there's an opportunity to kind of explain why or what those changes are, or does it make sense to be residential? Does it make sense to be some other type of use? Really where you're, why are you responding the way you are to this question here? And again, a lot of the justification that we're seeing or feedback that we're seeing is either we just don't want to see these at all, loss of trees, increased kind of commercial activity and traffic are the common themes so far that we've seen within this. And again, we'll dig deeper into this and actually get some more detailed responses for you. But at this stage, that's kind of the high level what we're seeing. And then we did a follow-up or flip that question and asked, are there any locations that should be considered for neighborhood commercial districts? And this is a pretty broad spectrum of responses to this one. We did see a lot of no's, just as a blanket statement. I think that a lot of people were still kind of frustrated over the experience of Meridian Market. So some of that definitely frustration carried over into this. And then there were some zones that are called out that could make sense as future locations. So we'll look at those. I think a lot of those are already designated as some type of mixed use or commercial location. So
geographic area versus the legal.
Yeah. So that's some of the feedback that we're seeing there. And then we did an open-ended one just to conclude the survey. So while we did have, the specific questions that we had identified that we wanted to make sure that we had responses to, we wanted to give folks a space to really kind of provide any other comments, leave any other feedback that may have not really been appropriate in any of the other question blocks. So this is still pretty open-ended. Some of it is neighborhood commercial emphasis, and we actually get a whole host of things that are just kind of across the board feedback for the city. So that'll be a valuable thing to comb through and see what we can find in there. But yeah, that's the survey that we have so far. Those are the responses. And those are kind of some of the trends that we're seeing borne out in that feedback today.
Hans, how would you describe the mood of the people who showed up at the Salish Middle School event?
Yeah, I think that there's definitely a lot of energy in the room. I think folks, we probably had, I don't know, 20 to 30 people show up even before the doors were technically open. So I think that there was definitely a lot of energy there. I think that there was for sure some frustration around Meridian Market, which I think is one of the reasons that we chose that location, is that we really wanted to be as close to that spot as possible to really kind of hear from those residents. But I think also a lot of people recognize the greater value of this effort. So there was maybe early on in the conversation with folks, there was kind of that frustration component, but then there was a recognition that there is value to this. And looking forward, this really is how we make that meaningful change and how we get out in front of this. So I think that there was a lot of, at least personally, the conversations that I had with folks, I think that there was a lot of valuable feedback and willingness to kind of look forward and kind of thinking kind of long-term how we can make more significant changes that really kind of will drive these zones moving forward. So I think that was a really positive result. I know that Ryan was there. I don't know if he has any other thoughts or feedback on the conversations that he had.
Yeah, I mean, I would summarize it in one word, which is, I think, frustration. Frustrated people that have moved out there with certain expectations that maybe didn't match what the reality was. So a lot of people, essentially we have a new population that lives in Northeast Lacey that didn't maybe 10 or 15 years ago. And a lot of them have moved from other locations because they're trying to, move from places that had traffic congestion, that had a lot of development, that had warehouse and truck uses and those kinds of things, and saw this enclave in Northeast Lacey as being this kind of like, very quiet suburban area where, those things weren't going to happen. And then as time went along, they never really did their research and then became increasingly more and more frustrated as the land uses that had been planned for the better part of 30 or 40 years came to fruition. And so now they're at the point of, okay, here we are, now what can we do about it? And feel like that they haven't had a voice in how this is developed because they weren't part of the community when those decisions were made. And, they're frustrated with the staff that feel like, we're just allowing willy-nilly development to occur unplanned. They're frustrated with council with decisions that for one reason or another have been made. So frustration is really kind of what I would, summarize in one word, the feeling out there. It was good to talk to people. I felt like I was holding court at a table with a line, people that were in line to talk to me for, the line was for an hour and a half. I had people in front of me and I turned around and started. We had to hold people back from coming in early. And then by 7:30, I checked my watch. I'm like, dang, I haven't taken a breath. I think it's good. We did a really, really good job of hearing from people, not presenting too much information, taking in as much information as we can. Again, but there's a lot of people that feel like, okay, you've heard us now, what are you going to do about it? So maybe Hans, do you want to talk about kind of next steps? I know that, you present a lot of information, but, kind of what are we going to do with that?
Let me interject just for a minute or two, because, the open house was well designed too, because we anticipated some of this and being a listening session. And so with all those stations that was planned out, we also had, in addition to Ryan and Hans, several other staff there to help with docents as well as the planning commission. So there's a lot of opportunity for people to interact with different parts of the city and that legislative process. And we actually set up a station too, for those that just want to focus on the Meridian market decision and project, that way they could sit there and use that whole time to talk about that, while others could maybe have their opportunity to voice their frustration and move on to the, looking at, okay, how do we address these things going forward? And that's where that you saw that picture, you saw that kind of circle of stations. That's kind of the way that when Hans set it up, that people can work through. But if they really wanted to talk about that Meridian market issue, that they had a staff member there designated to hear them out and have a longer conversation. So I think it was well designed to reach people where they wanted to be and to let them be where they want to be, so we can have a true listening session. And so I want to commend Ryan and Hans for design and all the other staff that participated in this to be able to have that conversation with the public. Like, as Ryan said, there's a lot of frustration out there, but the next one way to start working through that frustration is start having these conversations.
Robin?
I think I may know the answer to this, but sometimes when decisions like this happen, it's difficult to avoid conflating an established process with the decision. And so I'm wondering how much of that heat that you heard from people who showed up and got in line to talk to Ryan for an hour and a half had to do with the quasi-judicial process versus the specific zoning definition that you were really asking about and trying to provide information about. I'm guessing it was a lot.
I think if you talk with the staff and what we hear, what I've had conversation, the biggest frustration is not being able to talk to their elected officials. And in whatever format, the one thing is the process and the project, they're still going to be frustrated that would be going forward, but to not understand why they can't talk to their elected officials is a big frustrating point. I think we see it every time we go through the quasi-judicial process on a controversial topic. And I think Ryan and Hans and the others, Grant and Samra and Reese all heard that as well last Tuesday night.
And so part of the work that you did on Tuesday may have been helping yet more people understand a little bit more about the limitations of the quasi-judicial process.
Correct.
Even though that wasn't the focus of the meeting, there was community outreach related to the quasi-judicial process.
And I think
some of the survey responses as well.
Yeah, and we did recognize that going in. So actually a couple of the stations that we had ran through the review process for any prospective developer that wants to site something in one of these neighborhood commercial districts. So as far as the full administrative review or the quasi-judicial review, oh man, there we go. We had stations that addressed both of those and actually what that process looks like. And then we also had a breakdown, and these were located right next to Meridian Market. And then directly following Meridian Market Station, we had one that ran through types of land use decisions and really kind of what a legislative planning style decision would be versus what a kind of application specific project quasi-judicial process would be, and really kind of some of the differences there. Because that was like one of the topics that we anticipated that we were going to have a lot of conversations about. So we do have graphics that were up at the open house and then also available online as part of this kind of live virtual open house that we still have running, that run through that and try to address some of those questions as best we can. And then, yeah, go for it.
I was just going to say it is worthwhile. It's time well spent to help folks understand that there is the process and there's the definition of the zoning. Like those are two different things, and both of them can be changed, but through very different processes.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And it is complicated for somebody that's not, looking at this on a regular basis. So we definitely did get had a lot of opportunities to have that discussion and run through kind of what that looks like and try to illuminate it a little bit more and make it a little bit more simple. So, and then the last poster that we did have was the what's next or next steps poster that kind of runs through where we're at today and then where we want to be moving forward. So winter 2022, where we're at today, was the kind of initial kickoff, community outreach, open houses, just trying to get as much feedback as possible and really just kind of make ourselves available to receive comments and without really kind of directing that feedback and really just seeing where it takes us. So that's step one. And then step two, transitioning into next year, is really kind of, once that survey closes at the end of December, is really kind of going through that in a detailed way and really kind of extracting as much meaning and guidance from that feedback as possible. And then we'll be representing back to you guys as well as the Planning Commission as far as actual complete findings once the survey has been closed and when we have a better understanding and grasp on what a lot of those open-ended comments are. And then spring 2023, identify alternatives in community review. So based on the feedback that we received within the survey, and after we've had discussions with Planning Commission and represented this information to you guys, the next step is going to be developing some alternatives, identifying some changes that we might be able to make within our code, looking at some other community examples based on that question that we had, some other examples of how other communities may have approached these zones, and then really kind of representing those alternatives based on the feedback that we've heard back to the community to hear whether or not we're getting it right, essentially is what that'll be all about. So this is what we heard. This is what we're thinking based on that feedback that we've received. Is this consistent with what you were trying to tell us at the beginning of this process? So that'll be step number 3, if you will. And then based on that feedback, we'll start really kind of drafting updates to this section of our code, looking at really kind of just seeing what changes need to be made and really putting those in draft form. And then that'll be recirculated. And ideally sometime spring, summerish, those can be incorporated depending on what types of changes folks are looking for as the general timeline. And that'll be city council review and potential adoption. Yeah, that's kind of the timeline.
Sounds very plan, do, check, adjust. The solid sort of change management project plan.
Yeah, I mean, what we really want to make sure is that the community is included and involved at every step of the way, and that we don't make any steps that aren't first confirmed, and really kind of, we want that constant feedback because there is a lot of attention to this and a lot of frustration around it, as Ryan was talking about. So we want to make sure we get it right.
I don't know if it's appropriate or not, but as you were talking along, I was wondering how this information might be shared with people who are interested in developing out there, to show them, what the neighborhood might embrace and what they might be hostile to.
As we talk with potential property owners, investors, and brokers, this information would be shared. Also, there are people that own some of those properties out there, and we reached out to them, let them know this process is going on. So they're kind of putting their plans on hold to participate in this process as well, so that they will have a little better understanding of what community needs are, but also opportunity for designing things that would meet this newer framework that will be produced out of this process. But ongoing with all the neighborhood commercial properties, this has become an area of information that then, as we hold pre-subs or anything like that, it will inform those developers of what some of those neighborhood expectations are for these type of commercial districts.
And all this information is going to be made available once the survey is closed. We're going to post it to the project website, really kind of as part of the transparency of this. We really want to make sure that this is as open and available for folks to review at every step of the way as possible. So all this content is also going to be added to the website as we have it. So yeah, I think that about covers everything that I wanted to touch on today. Are there any other questions?
Robin, you have anything?
And we will be reporting back as we close the survey and actually spend the time to dig through all the responses and feedback. So we will have more opportunities to run through this and really kind of dig deeper.
And we also will be either in the second meeting and work session in January or first work session in February, holding our joint meeting with the council and planning commission. And as a little foreshadowing, we're going to talk about the joint planning with the county effort. Also the plan for updating for the 2025 comp plan updates, and probably another briefing on this to have the planning commission and council also have the opportunity to look at this neighbor commercial district together and have a conversation as well. So this will be coming for the full council in that format at some point too.
Has the planning commission been talking about this issue also?
Yeah, we had planning
Yeah.
commission members at the event last Tuesday. We had a quorum. I think a majority of the planning commission members there were there last Tuesday night.
Oh, that's great.
Including some of the recent appointed ones.
Oh, good. To get a sense of what they're getting into.
I stood up all the new folks near the Meridian Market one. It's really,
Such kindness.
no.
Thanks for volunteering.
Yeah, no, I think all in all, it was a great event. And I think as Rick said earlier, there were a lot of folks that helped pull it together. So it was very appreciated that I think it went off as well as it did.
Righty. Well, Hans, thank you so much. I appreciate that. That was really informative. And unless anybody else has anything else, I guess we can wrap this up.
Yeah, and I will send along some of the draft results, or I guess not draft, but the results that we have to date. So there'll be more.
I'm
but
interested.
It'll there's a lot of open-ended stuff. So there's many pages of comments that as you desire are there to read.
Oh, I did have one more question.
Mhm.
When you started talking about the survey, I went on the Lacey website to see where the survey was, and it isn't posted on the homepage, I don't think, unless I missed it somewhere. So how do people know how to find it if they're not just
I will take a
swimming
look at that.
around on the website? Because the way I
Yeah.
found it is I searched neighborhood in the search bar. Like the search function works well, so that got me to the page that you showed us with all the information and the link to the survey. But if there was a way to put links to not just this survey, but other surveys like on the front page, so that we got people who might not even be thinking about the thing the survey's about, but might come to the website for some other reason, but be willing to take the survey. I wonder if there's an opportunity there.
We can definitely further promote that. I know all of our social media oriented blasts and the stuff at the open house and the mailers that went out and the emails all had direct links. So folks could follow those directly, but yeah, we can definitely get it up.
Yeah,
More.
we'll check with public affairs, see if we can have a spot prominent on the homepage that can direct people there.
Cool. Thank you for all the work you've done on this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Alrighty, last call. Okay, we'll call it adjourned. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.